Ladies and gentlemen, we have Ondo and Kogi, and others are also on their way. So maybe instead of waiting, the Secretariat will require about 30 minutes. Maybe we take 30 minutes short break. It's about 4:15. Shall we reconvene at 5? Thank you.
All right, there you have it. Two more states results. Nasarawa.
3, actually. We have the FCT, well, that's a territory,
That's
Kwara
territory.
and Nasarawa.
And Kwara and Nasarawa.
Yes.
So, well, 3 more results, but those of 2 more states, along with the FCT. A 45-minute break from the Collation Center, so says INEC chairman. They were waiting for the representatives from Ondo State, but they decided to give them some time to get ready. And so we're back here. Again, we're going by Jide's classification.
Jide was smiling, shaking his head.
Jide's classification. So, Jide,
expected.
3 more results. Expected.
Unusual. Surprising.
So which are these?
But I'm sure a lot of viewers that were not here when we defined expected, unusual, and surprised. So I think we should explain what it means. When we say expected, I use the example of Lionel Messi. You might want to use Cristiano Ronaldo. If he scores 1 goal, it is expected. If Lionel Messi gets a red card in the match, it is unusual. And if he scores 2 hat-tricks, then the match not necessarily was fixed, but Lionel Messi scoring 2 hat-tricks, you probably classify that as you were surprised.
Right.
What we have right now is we've got 5 results. I will classify 3 as surprised, and then 1 unusual, 1 expected. So maybe, Ijoma, let's start with the expected. Kwara State, we have the incumbent party winning by a margin of 170,800 votes. The reason why this is expected is 2015, the incumbent or candidate Buhari then was candidate, won by 169,000 votes, even though that was the first time he was going to be winning in Kwara State. So we look at his margins, 169,000 in 2015, 170,000 now. So perhaps you could classify that as expected. There are 3 states, however, that I classify as surprised. The first is Ekiti State. The president in all his previous 4 elections has never won in Ekiti State. Ekiti State is one of the 15 states he has never won. In 2015, his losing margin was 56,000. This time, for the very first time, he's won in Ekiti State by a margin of 65,000 votes. And so I classify Ekiti as surprised. The second surprise comes from Osun State. 2015, the candidate Buhari's winning margin in Osun State was over 130,000. This time around, that winning margin has been cut down to just a little over 10,000. And even though Osun State currently has, as its governor, a governor from the ruling party. The third surprise comes from Nasarawa State. Ladi, in all the president's history of contesting elections, he has never won in Nasarawa State. Nasarawa State is just one of those 3 states he has never won. The other 2, Plateau State and Taraba State. Last election, his losing margin was 36,622. This time, he's managed to win Nasarawa State by a little over 6,000. The final is the state that I classify as unusual, and that is the Federal Capital Territory. And even though candidate Buhari lost in the Federal Capital Territory in 2015 by a losing margin of 10,796, this time, Ladi, his losing margin in the Federal Capital Territory is 107,773. And so those are the three categories. Surprised, Ekiti, Osun, Nasarawa. Unusual, Abuja. And expected, Kwara. But in all of this, Nigerians are asking what is going on, who is winning? And to just make it simple without speculating, the easiest way to look at it is this time in 2015, when these 4 states and the FCT had been announced, what did the results look like? So this time in 2015, we had 4 states, the same 4 states and the FCT. The president or candidate Buhari was leading by 199,665. That is a statement of fact.
That's in these 5 states?
In these 5 states. This time, in these 5 states, his margins are down to 144,539. So clearly we've seen that the president, based on these results, is still in the lead, but compared to the sort of margins he had in 2015, those margins are down. But at this moment, we can't specify, we can't clearly state who will win or who would.
Because there are those that, hearing you say he's in the lead, they'll be worried or concerned. So let's leave who is in. Let's just face what we're seeing right now. Mr. Guye, expected, surprised?
Well, I'm not as gifted as
in statistics.
Statistical categorization and all that. But let me just say this. There is a trend in the results being announced now. And that's significant to note. And that trend is that in all the results that have been declared thus far, the margins are not too wide apart. And the votes, duly votes, cast and counted are not as high as they used to be.
For instance, Nasarawa is really close, 289,903 to 283,847.
Implying, therefore, that the two parties are very competitive against each other. And that's something that we'll need to watch, until the final results are announced. Does that suggest the strength of the parties? Maybe, maybe not. Does that again suggest in the mind of the electorate that the two parties are regarded as not too different from each other? Maybe yes, maybe not. So, but at the end of the day, Nigeria will be able to see, how these results pan out. The usual worry though for partisans and people who are really, really keen on one candidate or the other is that these results are usually not the big results being expected. In 2015, and that's a fact, at a particular time when these big results were being announced and Rivers was yet to be brought, River was eventually brought and we had 1.something million. You have the number and all that. And there was a query of that. We all realized that Jega had to establish an ad hoc team to go investigate the Rivers election. And on that occasion, we are wondering, what did Jega mean? To go investigate? Are they going to travel to Rivers to start an investigation and all that? And on that occasion, we did point out that, well, that would not matter much anymore. So, and a deft, and if you dare ask me, a political decision was taken on that occasion. Yes, Rivers, killings, blood and all that, but the margin was wide. And so even if Rivers came in with all its staggering figure, it will not amount to much. And that critical phase with the Urubebe factor was then well managed, and Nigeria was saved the agony of having a very serious cataclysmic post-election violence.
But Mr. Guye, if you look at the figures that are coming in right now, one of our panelists earlier on was talking about the other parties that are not perhaps regarded as a two-horse race, not regarded in that maybe side, let's put it that way. But when you look at the number of voided votes, one of the panelists was saying the number of voided votes is even less than some of the candidates have scored, those who are not high in the race. So you look at figures like 42 and 16, and you look at the number of voided votes, they didn't even make up to that. What is happening? We thought that with the talk of new entrants and some of the narrative we heard so far, we would see, you know, these new parties at least doing better in terms of their numbers.
No. Quite frankly, and I wasn't writing off those new parties. I wasn't expecting that we were going to have a very good showing in this election. Because, you know, let's face the facts. Some of them do not even have sufficient polling agents to cover a state. You know, when you pulled their polling agents together across the entire country, you know, they don't even have sufficient polling agents to cover a state. And then you want to win those elections on a countrywide basis. How is it going to be possible? Because your polling agents are supposed to be your eyes who will protect the interest of the party and the candidate at the polling booths, right? And so it's difficult not to talk about the structure, whatever structure means, because some people think that structures in Nigerian politics are not bricks and mortar. You are talking about money to oil the system and all that. So not to talk about the following, not to talk about those who have expectations and so on and so forth. However, which is a point that has been a recurring issue in the prevailing circumstances. The critical question remains how we're going to strike a balance. There's some people who feel strongly about these new entrants. And of course, you know that the big parties have attempted, via the amendment of the Electoral Act, and I'm referring section 78, 7, paragraph A, subparagraph 2, to intervene and then say, if there's an election and you can't win the presidency, you can't win a governorship election or a legislative seat, INEC reserve the right to withdraw your certificate and say you cannot exist any longer. But following that legislative intervention, there has been litigation. Fresh political party, I know this, instituted an action against INEC. They said, what do you mean? We may not be all over the country and all that, but we're as fresh as ever. And every election cycle, we come on television and then we advertise. So you can't say that our existence should be predicated on our winning any legislative seat and all that. And they won that election because what the court decided in that case and in another case instituted by the Lagos chapter of the NCP, which went to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal gave a judgment in favor of the party, in favor of preserving the party. What the courts were deciding in those cases were to look at the Electoral Act's provision vis-a-vis the provisions that regulate the registration and existence of political party in the Constitution. And the court held that the Electoral Act, as beautiful as it is an inferior law compared to the Constitution, and that its provisions cannot, because of the supremacy clause in the Constitution, section 1, section 3, override the provisions of the Constitution. So if you want to do anything about those political parties, therefore, assuming it is desirable, and I don't think it is. I started off this evening by saying that all these young parties, please, in an organic manner, come together. This is an abuse of the democratic space. You've seen how long it's taken to be wading, yes, literally wading through the papers, announcing 0, announcing 4, in a presidential election, in a state. So if you score 0 in a state, if you score 2, well, what are you doing there, right?
Well, people say it's their democratic right to, even if you had 4, well, I've exercised my right.
Democratic rights are not allowed like that. That's why I've talked about power and responsibility, authority, and accountability. We talk about government being accountable. We should also be accountable as Democrats, as human beings, to ourselves and to society. That's the point I'm making. Because this atomization, this minuscule political parties, shapes the whole idea of having political parties. And I'm saying that it's not just sufficient for people to say, I want to be a president. Anybody can want to be a president, and then not think about how to build
a base,
a movement to pose a challenge. It's important that we think about that. Otherwise, we risk, and you know this democracy, we risk a stronger legislative intervention. Because a lot of people, you study the social media, already some people are saying, INEC, what are you doing? Just be announcing the result of the two parties. All the other parties, you go and look for scratch card so that they can know the results they have. Yeah, it's already trending on the social media. So it's not just sufficient for us to say that, yes, it's their democratic right. And so, and I want, if it's their democratic right, do then envision a situation whereby we have about 200 political parties? So what ballot paper are you going to use? So something must give. Before something gives, therefore, Nigerians have a responsibility. These new entrants have a responsibility to band together. What are the issues? And I have said that we are not even many enough to occupy all the political offices in Nigeria. All these young parties, I'm telling you, in terms of personnel, in terms of all the offices that are available, board appointments and so on and so forth, you are not that many. So why not collectivize your strength and then see whether you can indeed pose that kind of challenge? That's the point I'm making.
Jide, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, and Mr. Ogunye is right. I also have three ways of looking at this. The first is, if you look at what did the third candidate score when the results were released in the 2015 presidential elections, the APA candidate, he scored only 53,000 votes in an election that had 29 million valid votes. That's what the third party scored, 53,000 votes. The second is, on Saturday, while I was at the polling unit, and you trust me, laddie, before I cast my vote and I picked up that polling paper, my ballot paper, I studied it and I realized that a lot of these parties were just creative with logos rather than being creative with their programs. So you look at the logos and you find squirrels, eagles, lions, elephant, horse, fish. The one that surprised me the most was on one of the parties, the logo is a ram. So you realize that...
Ram?
Yeah, ram. As the party logo.
Ram meat can be good. So they are creative. You thought you weren't creative.
I was trying not to laugh.
That, yes, you vote for us, you have a lot of good things.
You know, perhaps, but
it's delicious.
What for me struck me the most is that on the ballot paper of the presidential ballot paper, you had 73 parties, 73. The ballot paper for the House of Reps and the Senate did not even have up to 73 parties. So what you realize is that a lot of these parties are focused on a top-to-bottom approach. The right strategy is bottom up. Yeah. So unless these new emerging parties take that bottom-to-top approach, then they wouldn't be getting more votes. Now, Mr. Ogunye talked about the big numbers. We only have 5 results right now. Where are the big numbers going to be coming from?
I remember you were analyzing, talking about Benue and is that your mind still there?
Yeah, that's Katsina
and Benue. You had said that all week.
Benue, Kwara. Those two states that whoever wins those two states
usually wins.
Always wins. Always.
So now you're waiting for.
So now you're waiting for Benue. Is that it?
I'm waiting for Benue, but even more than waiting for Benue, all that is really for the history books. Two things will either happen. It's either history will repeat itself, or
new history will be created.
New history will be created. But there are two states that the incumbent is really concerned about: Kano and Katsina. In 2015, those were the two states he had the margin of over 1 million. Laddie, here's what I mean. For President Buhari, he needs Kano and Katsina more than he needs oxygen. Now, for the opposition party, two states provided them with a margin of over 1 million votes: Rivers and Delta State. For the major opposition party, he needs those two states more than he needs his heart. Let's look out for what will happen in those 4 states.
All right, thank you very much. In this segment, we've had with us Chiti Ogunye, who is our election consultant and a legal practitioner, and of course our numbers man, not Sheung, our other numbers man, Babajide Ogunsawo. Thank you both for joining us on this segment. We'll take a break here and we'll be back shortly.